She took a human experimental drug by mistake. What it did to her was beyond control. Accidental exposure. Lyra Nix's head throbbed as she regained consciousness, the sterile white ceiling of the medical bay swimming into focus. The last thing she remembered was raising a toast with the human crew of the research vessel Horizon after successfully mapping an uncharted nebula. Now her entire body felt like it was being rewired from the inside, every nerve ending crackling with unwelcome energy. "She's awake," a familiar voice said. Dr. Fallen Rivera moved into Lyra's field of vision, concern etched across her features. The doctor's normally calm demeanor was replaced with barely concealed worry as she checked the vitals displayed on the monitor beside the bed. "What happened?" Lyra asked, her voice emerging as little more than a rasp. She tried to sit up but immediately regretted it as the room tilted violently around her. "Easy there," Dr. Rivera said, gently pushing her back down. "You had a severe reaction to something at the celebration. We're still trying to determine exactly what." Lyra closed her eyes, trying to remember. The celebration, yes. Commander Wells had broken out a bottle of rare earth whiskey, insisting everyone try at least one shot to honor human tradition. As the only Stellarian on board, Lyra had been hesitant. Her species' physiology processed some human consumables differently, but the camaraderie of the moment had won out. "The whiskey?" she asked. Dr. Rivera shook her head. "Not exactly. We think your drink was accidentally mixed with something else." She hesitated, then continued. "Initial scans show traces of XR-27 in your system." Lyra felt her blood run cold. XR-27 was a military-grade human enhancement serum designed to temporarily boost strength, reflexes, and endurance in emergency combat situations. Even among humans, its use was strictly regulated. "How did that happen?" she demanded, the four luminescent freckles that dotted her cheekbones, a distinctive feature of Stellarians, flaring bright purple with alarm. Lieutenant Reed was carrying a dose in his pocket for emergency field testing. The vial must have cracked when someone bumped into him at the party. It leaked into the bottle that was used to refill your glass. Lyra's third eyelid flickered nervously, another Stellarian trait that emerged during stress. "What's it doing to me? I feel strange." Dr. Rivera's expression turned professional, but Lyra caught the flicker of unease behind it. "Your biology is processing the compound in unexpected ways. Your core temperature is elevated, neural activity is off the charts, and we're seeing unusual hormone fluctuations." "Fluctuations? What kind of fluctuations?" The concern in Lyra's voice was evident as she noticed for the first time that her skin had taken on a faint iridescent sheen, something that ordinarily only happened during a Stellarian's mating cycle. Dr. Rivera gave her a clinical look. "The serum appears to be triggering your reproductive physiology. From what I understand of Stellarian biology, it's similar to your species' natural mating cycle, but much more intense." Lyra's face flushed deep blue with embarrassment. The typical Stellarian mating cycle occurred once every 3 years and was a deeply private affair, usually spent in isolation or with a chosen partner. Having it artificially induced, and on a ship full of humans no less, was beyond mortifying. "Can you counteract it?" she asked, already knowing the answer from the doctor's expression. "I'm afraid not. Not yet anyway. Your biochemistry is too different from ours. I've never seen how XR-27 interacts with Stellarian physiology before." Dr. Rivera checked the monitor again. "The good news is that it should work its way out of your system eventually. The bad news is that we don't know how long that will take or what other effects might develop in the meantime." "Wonderful," Lyra muttered, suddenly aware of an unpleasant tingling sensation spreading across her skin. "Can I at least return to my quarters? I'd rather not be on display when the symptoms worsen." Dr. Rivera nodded sympathetically. "I'll have to monitor you remotely, but yes, I think that would be best. I'll help you get there." As they made their way through the ship's corridors, Lyra tried to ignore the curious looks from the few crew members they passed. News traveled fast on a vessel this size. Everyone would know about her predicament soon enough. They had nearly reached her quarters when Commander Darius Wells rounded the corner, his imposing figure filling the narrow passageway. Lyra had always found the commander intimidating in an oddly appealing way, something she'd never admitted to anyone. With his strong jawline, intelligent gray eyes, and an air of authority that seemed to follow him like a shadow, he commanded respect without having to ask for it. "Dr. Rivera, Lieutenant Nix," he acknowledged them with a nod. "I was just coming to check on our patient. How are you feeling, Lieutenant?" Under normal circumstances, Lyra would have straightened her posture and given a formal report. Instead, she found herself acutely aware of the commander's presence in a way she never had been before. His scent, a subtle mixture of the ship's standard-issue soap and something uniquely him, was suddenly overwhelming. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, from 2 meters away. "I'm managing, sir," she replied, her voice sounding strange even to her own ears. Wells's gaze sharpened, nodding the unusual blue flush to her skin, and the way her luminescent freckles pulsed with a rhythm that matched her accelerated heartbeat. "I've authorized Dr. Rivera to pull whatever resources she needs to address your condition," he said. "Your well-being is a priority, Lieutenant." "Thank you, sir," Lyra managed, fighting the inexplicable urge to step closer to him. Dr. Rivera cleared her throat. "We should get Lieutenant Nix settled, Commander. She needs rest." "Of course." Wells stepped aside to let them pass, but not before his eyes met Lyra's once more. "Keep me updated on your condition, Lieutenant. That's an order." Once safely in her quarters, Lyra sank onto her bed, her legs no longer able to support her. The brief encounter with Commander Wells had left her shaking. Whether from the drug's effects or something else entirely, she wasn't sure. "I'll check in every hour," Dr. Rivera said, setting up a small monitoring device on Lyra's bedside table. "Try to rest, but call immediately if you experience any new symptoms." After the doctor left, Lyra curled into a ball on her bed, hugging her knees to her chest. The sensations rippling through her body were becoming harder to ignore, a burning heat that started in her core and radiated outward, making her hypersensitive to even the light touch of her uniform against her skin. This was beyond embarrassing. She was a senior xenobiologist, respected in her field, the first Stellarian to serve on a human research vessel. And now she was reduced to this, trembling in her quarters, at the mercy of an accidental drug interaction that was triggering the most primal aspects of her biology. What made it worse was the sudden, unwanted awareness of Commander Wells. In the 3 years she'd served under his command, she'd maintained a strictly professional relationship with him, despite the occasional inappropriate thought that might have crossed her mind. Now those thoughts were rushing forward with alarming intensity, accompanied by vivid images that made her entire body flush blue with desire. "This isn't me," she whispered to herself, pressing her palms against her eyes. "It's just the drug." But even as she said it, Lyra wasn't entirely convinced. The XR-27 might be amplifying her feelings, but it couldn't create something from nothing, which meant these impulses, however deeply buried, had been there all along. The realization was almost as disturbing as the physical symptoms themselves. Her communicator chirped, startling her from her thoughts. Reaching over with a shaking hand, she tapped the screen to accept the incoming message. "Lieutenant Nix." Commander Wells's deep voice filled her quarters, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. "Dr. Rivera informs me that your condition is evolving. I'm calling an emergency meeting with our science team to explore all options. In the meantime, is there anything you need?" Lyra bit her lip hard enough to draw blood, a deep blue droplet that she quickly wiped away. What she needed wasn't something she could ask for, especially not from her commanding officer. "No, sir," she lied, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I'm managing." There was a pause, long enough that Lyra wondered if the connection had dropped. Then Wells spoke again, his voice softer. "Lyra, this isn't just your commanding officer asking. It's also a friend who's concerned. Whatever you're going through, you don't have to face it alone." The use of her first name broke something loose inside her. Before she could stop herself, words tumbled out in a rush. "It's getting worse. The heat, the sensitivity, everything, and I don't know how to control it. On my world, we have rituals, techniques, partners who understand." She stopped, mortified by how much she'd revealed. Another pause. "I see," Wells said finally. "Hold tight, Lieutenant. We're going to figure this out." The connection closed, leaving Lyra alone with her racing thoughts and a body that felt increasingly like it belonged to someone else, someone ruled by instinct rather than reason. As night fell on the ship and the lights automatically dimmed to simulate evening, Lyra paced her quarters, unable to rest. Every cell in her body seemed to be singing with an energy that demanded release. The monitoring device Dr. Rivera had left beeped occasionally, recording her elevated vital signs, but otherwise the room was quiet. Too quiet. In the silence, there was nothing to distract her from the storm building inside. A sudden knock at her door made her jump. "Lieutenant Nix," Commander Wells's voice came through the intercom. "May I come in? I have information from the science team." Lyra hesitated, unsure if being in close proximity to the commander was wise given her current state. But the need for answers outweighed her caution. "Enter," she called, stepping back to put as much distance between them as the small quarters would allow. The door slid open, and Commander Wells stepped inside, a data pad in his hand and determination in his eyes. Little did either of them know that the night would change everything, not just for Lyra, but for the entire crew of the Horizon. Unforeseen consequences. Commander Darius Wells had faced his share of crises during his 15 years in the Interstellar Research Fleet. Hostile alien encounters, navigational emergencies, even a mutiny attempt on his first command. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of Lieutenant Lyra Nix in her current state. The Stellarian stood before him, her normally composed demeanor completely shattered. Her silvery skin had taken on an almost translucent quality, with swirling patterns of iridescent blue pulsing just beneath the surface. Her luminescent freckles flickered rapidly, and her uniquely alien eyes, all iris, no whites, with vertical pupils, were dilated to their fullest extent. "Lieutenant," he said carefully, maintaining his position by the door, "the science team has been reviewing everything we have on Stellarian physiology and comparing it to what we know about XR-27. Lyra nodded, wrapping her arms around herself as though trying to physically hold her body in check. "And?" she asked, her musical voice strained. "The news isn't ideal," Wells admitted. XR-27 was designed to enhance human performance by temporarily rewriting certain neural pathways. In your biology, it appears to be latching onto your reproductive system instead. Lyra's third eyelid flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme distress. "That matches what I'm experiencing," she said quietly. Wells cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, but knowing they needed to address it directly. "Dr. Rivera believes that the symptoms will continue to intensify until they reach some kind of peak. After that, they should begin to subside naturally." "How long?" Lyra asked. "Estimates suggest approximately 72 hours from initial exposure." Wells watched as Lyra's expression crumpled momentarily before she regained control. "3 days," she whispered. "I don't think I can. Commander, a normal Stellarian mating cycle is challenging enough, but this accelerated version," she broke off, turning away from him. Wells took an instinctive step toward her before forcing himself to stop. Something about her current state was affecting him as well, some pheromone or energy she was emitting that made him acutely aware of her as a woman, not just an officer under his command. "The science team has suggested some options," he said, keeping his voice professional. "Sedation is one possibility, though Dr. Rivera is concerned about how your system would handle it given the current hormone levels." Lyra turned back to him, a spark of desperation in her eyes. "And the other options?" Wells hesitated. "On Stellaris, how would you normally handle your mating cycle?" The blue flush on Lyra's skin deepened. "We either withdraw into isolation or seek a compatible partner." "I see." Wells carefully kept his expression neutral. "Dr. Rivera believes the latter approach might be most effective in processing the compound naturally." Lyra's eyes widened. "Are you suggesting that I with a human?" "I'm not suggesting anything, Lieutenant," Wells said quickly. "Just presenting the options as they've been explained to me. This is entirely your decision." The tension in the room shifted, becoming something electric that seemed to charge the very air between them. Lyra took a step closer to him, then another, until she was near enough that he could feel the unusual heat radiating from her body. "And if I did choose that option," she said, her voice lower than he'd ever heard it, "who would you recommend, Commander?" Wells knew he should step back, maintain professional distance, remind her of protocols regarding fraternization. Instead, he found himself saying, "Someone you trust, someone who understands the situation and won't take advantage of your vulnerability. Someone like you." Lyra's directness caught him off guard. Before he could formulate a response, his communicator chirped urgently. He glanced at the display and frowned. "It's Dr. Rivera. She's detected a concerning spike in your neural activity." As if on cue, Lyra gasped and stumbled. Wells caught her by the arm, steadying her. The moment their skin made contact, a visible shock wave of blue energy rippled from the point of touch, spreading across Lyra's skin like lightning. "Commander," she breathed, looking up at him with widened eyes, "something's happening." Wells's communicator chirped again, more insistently. He kept one hand on Lyra's arm while he answered with the other. "Wells here." "Commander, get out of there immediately." Dr. Rivera's voice was sharp with alarm. "We've detected a new development in Lieutenant Nix's condition. The XR-27 appears to be becoming transmissible through direct contact." Wells looked down at where his hand touched Lyra's skin, the blue energy still rippling outward from the point of contact. Already, he could feel an unusual warmth spreading up his arm, a tingling sensation that wasn't entirely unpleasant. "I believe it may be too late for that warning, Doctor," he said with remarkable calm. "Darius, no," Lyra whispered, using his first name for the first time ever. She tried to pull away, but he held firm. "It's done," he said. "Whatever happens next, we face it together." Dr. Rivera's voice came through again, tight with tension. "Commander, I'm implementing Emergency Protocol Delta 7. Both of you are confined to quarters until we determine the extent of the contamination. Medical monitoring will continue remotely. Do you understand?" "Understood, Doctor." "Wells out." He closed the communication and turned his full attention to Lyra, whose expression had transformed from desire to horror. "What have I done?" she whispered. "I never meant to expose you to this." "It wasn't your fault," Wells assured her, guiding her to sit on the edge of her bed as he took a chair across from her. Already he could feel changes beginning, heightened awareness of his surroundings, accelerated heart rate, a strange sense of his own skin being too tight. "Is this what you've been experiencing?" he asked, genuinely curious despite the circumstances. Lyra nodded. "It starts subtly, then builds. Every sense becomes sharper, every emotion more intense." She looked up at him, her alien eyes reflecting a complex mixture of fear and something darker, more primal. "It will be worse for you. Humans aren't meant to process these kinds of hormonal surges." Wells took a deep breath, calling on years of military discipline to center himself. "Well, I always did like a challenge. A small, reluctant smile tugged at Lyra's lips. This isn't the time for humor, Commander. On the contrary, Lieutenant, I find humor is exactly what's needed in impossible situations. He paused, studying her. And I think, under the circumstances, you should call me Darius. Before Lyra could respond, the ship's alarm system blared to life. Red emergency lights began flashing, and the automated announcement system activated. Attention all crew. Medical Emergency Protocol Delta 7 is now in effect. All personnel are to remain in their current locations and await further instructions. This is not a drill. Repeat, Medical Emergency Protocol Delta 7 is now in effect. Wells's communicator chirped again. This time it was Lieutenant Harrison Reed, his security chief. Commander, what the hell is going on? We have reports of crew members experiencing strange symptoms across 3 decks. Dr. Rivera's locked herself in the lab and isn't letting anyone in or out. Wells exchanged a concerned look with Lyra. What kind of symptoms, Lieutenant? Elevated heart rates, unusual skin reactions, aggressive behavior in some cases. Sir, Miller and Johnson nearly came to blows in the mess hall over a cup of coffee. This isn't like them. Implement full quarantine procedures. Read. No one enters or leaves their current location until we figure this out. Yes, sir, read out. As the communication ended, Wells turned to Lyra, whose horror had deepened. It's spreading, she whispered. But how? I haven't had contact with anyone but you and Dr. Rivera since the party. The party, Wells repeated, a terrible realization dawning. Lieutenant Reed said the vial cracked at the party. If even a small amount of XR-27 made it into the air circulation system. Combined with whatever my body is producing now, Lyra continued, understanding immediately, we could have a ship-wide contamination. Wells was already back on his communicator. Bridge, this is Commander Wells. Shut down all air circulation systems immediately. Seal off all compartments. Yes, sir, came the response. Sir, we're receiving reports of affected crew members from all sections. Whatever this is, it's already throughout the ship. Wells closed his eyes briefly, processing this new reality. When he opened them, he found Lyra watching him intently. This is my fault, she said quietly. My biology reacted with the serum and created something new, something contagious. We don't know that for certain, Wells countered, though he suspected she was right. And assigning blame doesn't help us find a solution. Lyra stood suddenly, packing the small room with agitated energy. There is one possibility, she said, not looking at him. On Stellaris, during particularly intense mating cycles, specially trained healers can perform a psychic linking ritual to help stabilize the affected individual. Wells raised an eyebrow. I wasn't aware Stellarians had psychic abilities. It's not psychic in the way humans understand it, Lyra explained. It's more biochemical, a temporary merging of neural patterns. She finally turned to face him. I've been trained in the technique, though I've never performed it outside of simulations. And you think this could help with our current situation? Lyra nodded. If I can connect with the ship's affected crew through you, since you're already exposed to whatever my body is producing, I might be able to help stabilize everyone's symptoms until the drug works its way out of our systems naturally. Wells considered this. As the commanding officer, his primary responsibility was the safety of his crew. If Lyra's suggestion offered even a slim chance of mitigating the crisis, he had to consider it, no matter how unorthodox. What would this entail exactly? He asked. Physical contact, Lyra said, her voice steady despite the blue flush deepening on her skin, and a level of mental and emotional openness that most humans find challenging. Wells stood, closing the distance between them. To save my crew, I'll try anything once. For a moment, they simply stood there, facing each other in the small cabin illuminated by the pulsing red emergency lights. Then Lyra raised her hands, placing them gently on either side of Wells's face. Her touch was electric, sending shivers across his skin. "Close your eyes," she instructed softly. "Try to clear your mind. Focus only on my voice." Wells did as she asked, surprised at how naturally he surrendered control to her. As her fingertips pressed more firmly against his temples, he felt an unusual sensation, as if the boundaries of his body were becoming less distinct, his consciousness expanding outward. "What you're feeling now is the beginning of the link." Lyra's voice seemed to come from both outside and inside his head simultaneously. "Don't fight it. Let the connection form naturally." Wells relaxed into the strange sensation, allowing his thoughts to quiet. As he did, he became aware of Lyra's presence, not just physical but mental as well. Fragmentary emotions and memories flickered at the edges of his consciousness. Lyra's pride when she was selected for the Horizon mission, her loneliness as the only Stellarian aboard, and most surprisingly, her long-hidden attraction to him. "Focus," Lyra's voice reminded him, though whether she spoke aloud or directly into his mind, he couldn't tell. "Reach out through me to the rest of the crew. Feel their presence." Wells concentrated, extending his awareness beyond the cabin. Gradually, he began to sense other presences, dozens of minds, all connected through the strange network created by the mutated XR-27 in their systems. Each crew member was experiencing the effects differently. Some with fear, others with confusion, many with inappropriate desire. The ship had become a cauldron of heightened emotions and physical responses, threatening to boil over into chaos. "Now," Lyra whispered, "help me stabilize them." Without fully understanding how, Wells found himself working in tandem with Lyra, using their joined consciousness to project calm throughout the network. It wasn't about dampening the physical effects of the drug, that was beyond their capabilities, but rather about helping the crew manage those effects with clarity and control. How long they remained connected this way, Wells couldn't say. Time seemed to lose all meaning in the merged state, but eventually he began to sense a shift, the frantic energy of the crew gradually settling into something more sustainable, the panic receding into determined focus. When Lyra finally withdrew her hands from his face, breaking the connection, Wells swayed on his feet. She steadied him, her own expression dazed but triumphant. "It worked," she said, wonder in her voice. "I can feel it. We've bought ourselves some time." Wells nodded, still processing the extraordinary experience they just shared. "How much time?" "Enough to find a more permanent solution, I hope." Lyra stepped back, creating distance between them again. "The connection will need to be reinforced periodically until the drug is out of everyone's system." Wells reached for his communicator. "Dr. Rivera, this is the commander. Status report." After a brief pause, Rivera's voice came through, sounding more composed than earlier. "Whatever you two just did, it helped. Vital signs are stabilizing across the board. I've managed to isolate the compound Lyra's body produced when it interacted with the XR-27. With a few more hours, I think I can synthesize a counteragent." "Excellent work, Doctor. Keep me informed." Wells turned to Lyra, who was watching him with those extraordinary alien eyes. "Looks like we make a good team, Lieutenant." "Yes, sir," she agreed with the ghost of a smile. "Though I have to say, this wasn't covered in the standard interspecies cooperation manual." Wells couldn't help but laugh, a release of tension that felt surprisingly good after the intensity of the past few hours. "No, I don't believe it was." His laughter faded as he noticed the way Lyra was looking at him, with a mixture of new understanding and lingering desire. Their mental connection had revealed truths neither had been prepared to acknowledge before. His growing feelings for her that went well beyond professional respect, her similar attraction to him that she'd kept carefully buried. "About what you saw when we were connected," Lyra began tentatively. Wells held up a hand. "We don't need to discuss it now." "But we will need to eventually," she persisted. once this crisis is over. Yes, he agreed, meeting her gaze directly. Once everyone is safe and back to normal, including us, we'll have that conversation. Lyra nodded, apparently satisfied with this compromise. In the meantime, we should check in with Dr. Rivera, see if there's anything we can do to help with the counteragent. As they prepared to leave the cabin, Wells paused at the door. For what it's worth, Lyra, if I had to be accidentally drugged with an alien aphrodisiac and mentally linked to someone, I'm glad it was you. The blue flush returned to Lyra's cheeks, but this time it was accompanied by a genuine smile. Likewise, Commander, she said softly. Likewise. Together, they stepped out to face the challenge ahead, and whatever might come after. The Horizon had weathered many storms during its mission, but none quite like this. Yet as they made their way toward the medical bay, Wells found himself thinking that perhaps this unexpected crisis hadn't been entirely unfortunate. Sometimes it took extraordinary circumstances to reveal ordinary truths, like the fact that the most remarkable connection in the universe might be the one between two people from different worlds, brought together by chance, science, and a twist of fate neither could have anticipated.